was the last time something knocked you down and you got back up? Not because you felt ready or because you were confident, just because staying down wasn't something you were willing to do. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rachel. I want to talk about the word badass because I think we've completely misunderstood what a badass actually is. Because the version we're usually sold is all surface. Tough, intimidating, fearless. The person who walks into a room like they own it and apparently hasn't experienced a single moment of doubt since they were a kid. And I think that version feels less and less connected to reality. The world is heavy. People are frickin' tired. Most of us aren't walking around feeling invincible. So today, I want to offer a slightly different opinion. One I think fits the people that I really admire. Merriam-Webster defines a badass as a tough, uncompromising, or intimidating person. Which, okay, but that's completely hollow. There's nothing in that definition about character or kindness. Nothing about what happens on the inside when the outside is falling apart. It's all surface. Performance is not the same thing as strength. That definition is not what I'm talking about. That's never been what I'm talking about. In one of my recent videos, I mentioned that I felt a little badass about my third cancer diagnosis, and I want to clarify that. Because I think some people heard, I'm going to kick cancer's ass, and that is not what I said. Mostly because I didn't exactly kick its ass the first 2 times. It came back twice. So clearly I'm not as good at kicking ass as I used to be. And yes, I have a playlist called Kicking Cancer's Ass. Again. In hindsight, I should probably rename that. But that is a problem for another day. The honest truth is, every morning when I take my meds, one of 2 songs always pops into my head. Every single time. It's either Dolly Parton's Here You Come Again or Whitesnake's Here I Go Again. I guess my brain can't decide if cancer is an unwanted ex or a solo road trip. Either way, there it is. What I actually meant was more like, okay, fine, again. I know how to do this. Not because I feel great about it. Not because I'm standing here brimming with confidence. But because I am still me, and I am pretty stubborn. And being me apparently means that I can go as many rounds as requires and figure out what each round needs when I get there. The best shorthand that I have for this feeling is Captain America. I know. Stay with me, though. Because here's what gets completely lost in the whole super soldier and the shield and all of it. Before any of that, when he is still a scrawny kid from Brooklyn who has absolutely no business being in a fight, he keeps getting his ass handed to him. Regularly. And he keeps getting up every single time. Not because he can win. He cannot win. But because staying down means being someone he isn't. And then he says it. I could do this all day. Not as a boast. He says it as a kid getting beaten in an alley. He says it as Captain America to Red Skull. He says it to Iron Man in Civil War when they're on opposite sides of something that genuinely matters to both of them. He says it as a callback in Endgame when everything is on the line. And every single time, he is getting his ass handed to him when he says it. That's not a coincidence. That's the point. It's not bravado. It's just, I'm still here. I'm still me, still doing this. And before we move on, remember that he is also genuinely kind and fair. He picks up the shield for other people, not for himself. Steve Rogers is dangerous because he will not stop being Steve Rogers. That's it. That's a badass. Not because of what he can do, because of who he consistently and quite stubbornly is, especially when everything is pushing him to be somebody else. Yeah, he's fictional. Still counts, though. That is what I meant. That felt like my badass moment, not the version that somebody puts on a mug. So, what is my actual definition? To me, a badass is somebody who is unapologetically themselves, fully, consistently, independently themselves, whether that's popular or not, comfortable or not, whether anyone's watching or not. They have a quiet confidence that doesn't need an audience. They're resilient. They get back up as many times as it takes. They stand up for themselves and for other people. They take no crap. They call an asshole if it's necessary. And here's the part that never makes it onto those mugs. A badass, I think, is sincerely kind, genuinely and deliberately, because it's a lot harder to be kind than it is to be indifferent. Indifference is easy. Cruelty is easy. Deciding that other people matter, even when you're exhausted and they can do absolutely nothing for you, that takes something real. And every single one of us has a different version of this. Your inner badass doesn't look like mine. It's built from your own specific brand of stubbornness and the particular way you keep getting up. That's yours. Nobody else has that exact version. There is no universal template. There's not supposed to be. Look, there are probably hundreds of books out there on how to find your inner badass. Jen Sincero alone has written, I think, 4 of them. One of my nieces gave me the first one when I was diagnosed back in 2017. I should probably reread it, actually, because honestly, I don't remember a word of it, which probably tells you something about where my head was at the time. And YouTube, I stopped counting the videos. There's the motivational version of badass, the hustle culture version, the bro stoicism, cold plunge, embrace the suffering version. There is no shortage of people ready to help you unleash, activate, or otherwise weaponize your inner badass. So, naturally, my brain looked at all of that and went somewhere else entirely. Shocking, I know. Did you really expect anything different from this channel? Movies aren't much help either, you know. The cinematic badass is pretty much always the exact same person. Tough, intimidating, can kick the shit out of anyone in the room, wins in the end. That is the template. That's what we've been watching for decades and calling strength. Fine, you know, it's entertaining, but it's not the whole picture. Every once in a while, though, a movie gets it right, and it's not always the one you'd expect. You know, we already talked about Steve Rogers, you know how I feel about that one, but have any of you seen the movie Tin Cup? Kevin Costner, the 90s, golf movie. Spoiler alert here, you know, but it's been almost 30 years, so sorry. Roy McAvoy is not Steve Rogers. Roy McAvoy is honestly kind of a mess. He's thrown away a promising career because he cannot pass up a stupid dare. But there is one scene in the movie, the US Open, a shot he cannot make. Keeps hitting the ball into the water, over and over. His caddy, losing his mind. The crowd is losing their mind. Everybody is saying the same thing. Take the penalty. Lay up. Play it smart. You can still walk away with something. But Roy keeps hitting the ball. He loses the tournament, but he wins the bigger game. And it doesn't matter. Not to him. Because laying up would have meant being someone he was not. Roy McAvoy was not willing to do that. Not for a win, not for anything. Aristotle had a concept for that. The idea that acting against your own character for a better outcome is still a loss, even when you technically win. Roy's character probably couldn't have told you any of that, but he knew that a version of himself that took the safe shot wasn't really him, and that cost more than the tournament. 2 completely different characters. One fictional superhero, one fictional golf pro who can barely keep his life together. But in the moments that matter, they are doing the exact same thing. Refusing to be anyone other than themselves when the pressure to do exactly that is at its highest. That is the badass that Hollywood occasionally gets right. Not the one with the most firepower, the one with the most character. And that's the thing. The older I get, the less interested I am in people who look strong, and the more interested I am in people who stay themselves when it would be easier not to. Because once you start looking for that quality, you see it everywhere. Not just in superheroes, not just in movies, in real people. Some famous, some you've probably never heard of, but all of them with one thing in common. Now, let's talk about the real ones. Take Dolly Parton. Built an empire on her own terms. Never apologized for who she is. Never tried to be what the industry wanted her to be. She funds enormous charitable work without making it her brand. Been underestimated her entire career. Doesn't care. Unapologetically herself. Genuinely kind. Takes no crap. Wrapped in a smile that makes you forget that she's doing that. That is a badass. Malala, I don't want to butcher her name. Malala Yousafzai. Yousafzai? But she was shot for going to school, and she went right back to advocating for girls' education. Not performing courage, just continuing to be exactly who she was before somebody tried to stop her. That is a badass. Jim Jones, not the one you're thinking of. This man wasn't a celebrity. Most people have never heard of this one. He was the head of the FDA's Food Safety Division. Not exactly the kind of job that gets action figures made. He spent years helping build the systems that keep what we eat from killing us. Then 89 of his people got fired in a single weekend. They expected him to carry on and pretend everything was fine. Instead, he wrote a letter saying he couldn't do the job without the people who made the job possible. And he walked. He knew what he stood for, and he was not willing to pretend otherwise. That is a badass. And he's not alone. You know, right now in offices and agencies and situations most of us never hear about, ordinary people are making that same call, choosing who they are over what they stand to lose. Some at really serious personal cost that most of us cannot imagine. Most of them you will never know by name. These are the people who stayed themselves under conditions specifically designed to change them. That is the whole definition of a badass right there. You know, the philosophers have been saying this for a really long time. Epictetus was a slave, owned by somebody else. No control over basically anything external. And he spent his life arguing that the one thing that nobody can ever take from you is your response. Not your health, not your bank account, not whatever fresh hell the news cycle is serving up today. Just your response. He wasn't speaking theoretically. He was speaking from the worst possible position to say that. And he said it anyway. Lao Tzu put it differently. You know, nothing in the world is softer than water, and yet nothing is better at wearing down the hard and the strong. Water doesn't force anything. It just keeps being completely, persistently itself until the thing in the way has no choice but to move or to wear down. Alan Watts made it even simpler. Stop fighting the river. Go with the grain of your own nature. It's not passivity. That's the whole game. Viktor Frankl survived things most of us genuinely cannot imagine, and he came back with one argument. When everything external is stripped away, and I mean everything in his case, what remains is how you choose to respond. He called it the last human freedom. Not performing strength, just stubbornly, relentlessly himself, finding meaning in circumstances that had no business producing any. Then Hannah Arendt covered the Eichmann trial after World War II and came back with something nobody wanted to hear. That evil isn't always monstrous. It can be perfectly ordinary, bureaucratic. What happens when people stop thinking for themselves? She said it anyway. Lost friendships, got vilified, but kept writing because it was true. In a climate where having an honest opinion is increasingly expensive, Hannah Arendt is your people. You know, different people, different centuries, same thing. Which brings me to something worth pointing out. A real badass, never a bully, even though that's what a bully tries to convince you they are. Someone with quiet confidence who stands up for themselves and other people without needing to tear anyone down to prove their worth, that is a badass. Their strength exists whether anybody is watching or not, whether they hold a title or not. Take it all away, and they're still exactly who they say they were. A bully is the exact opposite. Their entire identity depends on somebody else's submission. Take away the person they're pushing around, and there is nothing left. Their strength only exists in relation to somebody weaker, which means it's not strength at all. A bully thinks they're a badass. They are, in fact, not. What they are is insecure in ways they've never had the guts to look at directly. Real confidence, badass confidence, doesn't need your fear or your submission. It doesn't need a title or a position. It just exists quietly and consistently, whether the circumstances cooperate or not. You cannot bully your way into being a badass. It's never worked like that. Not once. So, your version. I know what you're thinking. These are extraordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, and I am just trying to get through the week. Yeah, I know. Same. Your version looks like the Tuesday when everything felt too heavy and you showed up anyway. It looks like the opinion you kept when the room pushed back hard. It looks like being kind to somebody when you had nothing left because it was the right thing and you knew it. It looks like deciding not to go down the internet rabbit hole today, even though the entrance is right there. It looks like the third time something knocked you down and you got back up. Not because you were ready, but because that's just who you are. That's a badass. Your version. The real one. You probably already are one. You've likely been one for longer than you realize. You just never called it that because the word got hijacked by people selling you something you don't need, by people who confused power with strength and a culture that decided a badass needs a set jaw and a fist raised, and a performance that most of us find exhausting just to watch. Your badass is quieter than that, and considerably more durable. You don't have to like what you're facing. You don't have to feel ready. You don't have to perform okay for an audience or greet hard things with this confidence and gusto that you don't actually feel. You just have to keep being you. To me, that is the whole definition of a badass. And honestly, that's philosophy doing exactly what it was supposed to do. It doesn't live in books. It lives in the moments when things get hard and you have to decide who you are. So, I've said it before, philosophy applies everywhere. Use it. Thanks for watching. Take care of you, and I will see you the next time. Bye-bye. It's time for me to water the garden and water the dog. Ready, sir? Can I water? Can I water? You all right, sir? Really? look like a drowned rat. Say goodbye.